Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia. That, of course, is Dinger Dan Harris, back again, and it's you. Oh, what a glorious time. It's already 2022. Football still going on, but Dan Harris and I just could not stay away for another episode of Leading Off / the MLB Podcast, and we're just happy to have the palate cleanser in 2022 to start the year of a little baseball talk. And I know right now all of the teams aren't doing anything because of the lockout. All the players are hanging out with their egg avatars, their ghost players, if you will, which I feel like in solidarity we should all do that too here. But it's more because of our looks than because we're on a lockout. But seriously, there's a little pause in the action, which allows us to really sit back and analyze what we've seen in the offseason so far, and in good faith here in 2022, since it is still basically the new year, we're going to have some New Year's resolutions for our fantasy baseball season as well. And Dan Harris, it is so fun to talk a little baseball with you. And it feels like it's, August maybe is the last time you and I sat down and talked baseball on a show? That's a long time, my friend.
Well, we did close it out. Don't forget.
Oh, that's right, we did. Right? We did show up at the end. That's right.
Yes, correct.
I couldn't stay away. I'm such a media hound. I just couldn't do it.
It has been a long time. And I'll blatantly honest, I don't think I realized how much I missed it, Joe, until we just had like a 10-minute rant about baseball right before recording. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We used to do this every single morning. Boy, that was fun. I'm excited, now that the football season or the fantasy football season is officially closed. It's so wonderful to allow ourselves to think about baseball again. I'm optimistic that all this labor strife will be worked out by the time spring training officially starts. But in the meantime, man, just the fact that we are here on Leading Off is so exciting to me. So yes, ready to go. I love it. Let's do it.
And I, of course, am pessimistic because I've watched every MLB labor negotiation my whole life, and none of them go well or smoothly for whatever reason. They had years to get this done where they could have figured this out. But of course, it's like that kid who has that assignment. They want to wait to the last minute. It's not going to get handed in on time. But I think we will have baseball eventually. So I'm hopeful. But cautious in my optimism. And also, I want to let our baseball audience know, if you'd like the full extent of the tribute to Dan Harris, go listen to yesterday's NFL podcast from 1/3/22. But this is Dan Harris's last baseball podcast with us too, not just football. Dan Harris got his dream job, which you think would have been working with me every day. I thought that was the dream job. Apparently it wasn't. I was fooled, I was duped, I was bamboozled about that, but I am so happy for Dan. I know you're all going to miss him, and you're going to say, what becomes of Leading Off? Don't worry, boys and girls. We've got an incredible plan coming at you for Leading Off. It's going to be bigger and better than ever. But Dan Harris, I know everyone's going to miss you on the baseball pod, so I don't want to talk any more about that because it makes me depressed. And if you want to talk to Dan Harris and make him depressed, you could do that on Discord or you could do that on Twitter. Let's talk baseball, and I can't believe we're going to start with the Mets. We're going to start with the Mets on a show about offseason moves. I don't know what's happened here. I can't even imagine that we're talking about this. But not only did they sign the best pitcher on the market in Max Scherzer, right? A Hall of Fame starter to go along with Jacob deGrom, God willing that he actually pitches. 3 years, $130 million. But they also signed Starling Marte, which I thought was a fantastic signing. Makes them more athletic, gives them a true center fielder, gives them a guy with power and speed. Again, this team becoming more athletic. Dan, I've always said the Mets' problem has been they are not an athletic team. They are very station to station. They don't run the bases well. They don't take extra bases. They don't field well in terms of range and things like that. They bring in Lindor. They bring in Marte. All of a sudden, I think that dynamics change. They brought in Eduardo Escobar, who's a very useful infielder, can play some different spots, has power, a bit all-or-nothing guy, but it worked out with Javier Baez a little bit, so maybe Escobar too. And Mark Canha, who is also a nice player. So I can't believe it, Dan. We're going to start with the Mets and the possibility of Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom starting together. And I guess I can only start with this, Dan. What's the over-under number in your head for the number of starts between these two? Can you get 50 starts between these two guys? And if you do, is that enough for the Mets to get to, the playoffs finally?
Yes. If you get 50 starts from Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, I think the Mets will make the playoffs. Yes. Okay. That's a great line, actually. I'll probably lean under. I'll probably lean at like 45. I mean, remember, because it looked like Scherzer was sort of beginning to break down a little bit in the shortened season. I got a little worried about that. Our good friends over at Pitcher List called me an idiot, and they were pretty much right. He was very, very good. He was fantastic. I mean, this last year. And when, as a just a total crazy Mets fan, when they signed Scherzer, I was like a giddy child. Like I couldn't control myself. I was so incredibly excited. I think the other signings that they've made are good. And it would not be surprising, Joe, given like Marte kind of expected to decline, Marcana expected to decline a little bit. Eduardo Escobar is fine. They're all at that age, right, where they could fall off a cliff entirely. But I think the Mets are approaching this correctly, which is to say, with Jacob deGrom, we probably have a 2-year window, maybe, right? So we are willing to sort of do this at this sort of age where we'll have these guys. I think it's been a brilliant offseason for them. I think Scherzer was a miraculous signing and one that I did not expect whatsoever. Marte, you mentioned, Joe. Again, he ran like a nut when he got to the A's last year, like crazy, because the stolen bases had sort of started to decline. Again, we talked about it, stolen bases being sort of a product of desire is our catchphrase. And if he wants to run, he will, but it improves the defense. It improves, sort of the athleticism. So banner offseason so far for the Mets. I wouldn't be surprised then for there to be no baseball season, so we can't see it come to fruition. But I do think it's going to be good all around, and it's a great signing, really.
Well, let's talk from the fantasy impact, too. You get an old-school manager like Buck Showalter. Do you think the stolen bases maintain then for Starling Marte with the Mets, and they let him do that? And what's the impact, if any, on New York Max Scherzer? That's the thing. It's New York can be a tough place to play. Max Scherzer doesn't seem to be that kind of a guy mentally to have those kind of issues, but it is a different media market. I mean, he's played in, some big situations before. I don't think it's going to make an impact on him, but you never know. So those are the two things I think the biggest questions. So how do you approach New York and Scherzer, and how do you approach Buck Showalter, and whether or not he's going to let basically Starling Marte run amok like you saw him do in Oakland?
I give no impact whatsoever to the fact that Scherzer is in New York. I think that Max Scherzer is one of the, from an athletic standpoint, so don't get it wrong when I say mentally tough or anything like that, but both he and Jacob deGrom, I have seen them on numerous occasions, Joe, when they've got nothing, right? The rare days when they have nothing and they're just like, F you, I got it, right? Like they just bear down. A guy like that who's like so incredible under pressure, I can't imagine that New York affects him whatsoever. He's going to be one of my top starting pitchers, of course, is here. So I give that zero credence. To Marte, I mean, look, he went to the A's and he ran like crazy too. And the A's are a very Moneyball type analytical team. They're not the type of team. If you're going to steal 47 bases and you're going to get caught 5 times, you can steal as much as you want. And I don't think Buck Showalter will have any issue with that. So again, that's really what it's about. Showalter's interesting though, because I feel like he evolves as a manager, right? Like he has changed a little bit as he's gotten there. So for me, I don't really think that the manager is going to affect Marte. It's going to be about his success rate. And I think Steamer has him for 30 stolen bases this year after 47 last year. I think that's right. I don't think we should get caught up in you're going to steal 50 at this age. He's going to be 33. I think a 30 is a fair projection for the guy, and that's basically what I'll have.
All right, let's talk about the other team that's been very, very busy this offseason, and that is the Texas Rangers. That's right. I mean, if you told me, Dan, in August we'd be leading with the Mets and the Texas Rangers on the free agency show, I'd say you were drunk, and you might have been possibly as well at the time.
I usually am. Anyway, that's
but, here you go. You've got an enormous contract here, $175 million, 7 years for Marcus Semien, 4 years, 56 for John Gray. They threw some money at Cole Calhoun. Okay, who cares? But the other one, obviously, the bigger one too, is Corey Seager, 10 years, 325. Let's start with Corey Seager, and let's start about this from a fantasy perspective. Okay, so he is moving from the National League to the American League. I think we all anticipate the DH is going to be a thing everywhere now. So in terms of, in terms of the leveling off of things and, interleague play and all that stuff, I think that's getting less and less of a deal as we go on. But Corey Seager is a guy that has certainly struggled with injuries in his career. Marcus Semien is a player who has been very good 2 of the last 3 years, and he was extraordinary last year. I don't want to take anything away from him, and I like Marcus Semien as a player. So I guess the question is, what are these signings going to do in terms of the impact and inflation you're going to pay for these players? Because you're talking about in auction formats, you're buying at the peak for both of them. You're talking about the publicity these guys are going to get because of these massive deals that in keeper leagues and dynasty leagues, people are going to say, well, the Rangers value these guys as cornerstone players, and maybe I should value these guys the same. How do you see these two guys, Simeon and Corey Seager, and what's the impact here in terms of whether or not you want to buy at this premium or not?
So I think I probably would not be buying at the premium for Simeon regardless, right? Marcus Simeon's 2021 season, Joe, is sort of the prime example of a guy that Dan Harris runs away from the following year. Just a complete kind of total outlier of a season. I mean, again, remember, nobody wanted him last year. He took the 1-year deal. And he played in obviously a little bandbox of several bandboxes, really, of last year. And now goes to, remember, Rangers it's not the old Rangers
Right.
park, right? It's different. It's not that great. So he's a guy who, Joe, my guess is the helium on him will just be way too high for me to want to play. Like, because a guy at this age who hits 45 home runs, not really where I want to go. But I do think
Also,
that
not the
Seager,
same lineup protection, too.
correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're going from a team that has Vlad Guerrero and Teoscar Hernandez, all these guys are on George
Right.
Springer,
Sure.
to the only other guy you have is Corey Seager. I mean, they're kind of tied to each other now, I think, to a certain extent.
I don't think fantasy managers are going to buy the Marcus Simeon numbers from last year because I think we've gotten smarter as a community. Our listeners, people who play, they're not going to look at Marcus Simeon, a guy of his age, and be like, wow, hit 45 home runs, a crazy season. It stole a ton of bases. I'm going to assume he's going to do that again this year because if you did, he'd basically be a first-round player. That's not where he's going to go. But either way, Joe, this is just, he's a breakout like this. It happens late in his career. I'm not buying it. So, I probably will have 0 shares of Marcus Simeon next year and I'll be okay with it. Seager, though, is a guy who I think Corey Seager is really one of the premier players in MLB. And I think it's okay to buy him at his peak with the understanding that you have to discount the counting stats because, again, as you aptly pointed out, he is moving from a lineup like the Dodgers where you have very good hitters up and down to the Rangers. And that's something that's going to be. And I think the thing with Seager is it's a little tough for me, Joe. I don't know about you. When I play fantasy baseball, especially in roto, which I know you hate, to buy a guy who's fantastic as a real life baseball player, an excellent fantasy option, but offers you nothing, especially in a middle infield position in the stolen base department, which he does, right? He stole 1 base last year, 1 base the year before, 1 base the year before that. So it's not like you can project that. And a guy who doesn't have the 40 homer bat really waiting to go. So a guy's going to hit for a great batting average, which is useful. And 25 home runs, probably under 100, and not a lot of stolen bases is a guy who I really like. Points leagues, I'm going to gobble him up. I'll buy him at the height. But in roto, he's probably a guy who I will also fade.
See, in the head-to-head is where I fear Seager the most in head-to-head points leagues because he always misses time. And that crushes you. You miss a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there in a season when you put a premium on a player in like a second round or first round talent. That's always very difficult. And I think that's the thing with both these guys. I think both of them have their place. If you have disciplined league mates that are going to let these guys be appropriately drafted, then maybe I'll have a share or two. But I think it's the opposite. I think you're going to get everybody who's going to buy into the inflation because that's just the nature of the beast for the most part. And I think everyone gets hung up too much on projectability. And also, big contracts, typically first year for guys, they struggle. There's a lot of pressure on guys, especially guys that haven't seen. Marcus Simeon, I don't think ever thought he was going to see that kind of money in his life. Right. And that's a lot. And it's also a new environment, new team, a team that has not been a good team for a very long time. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and personally, I'm just not buying into it. I'm not going to do it, so I'm out on those guys. I'm out. But I want to talk about John Gray, for instance, too, if I may. Because this is another player who is finally getting out of Coors, who I think, I remember having an argument a long time ago with a very high-end baseball person about John Gray versus Mark Appel, and I was like, guys, I don't know what you're watching, but there's no way Mark Appel is the same pitcher as John Gray. Like, John Gray is far and away better. I don't even know how they're in this conversation. But unfortunately, John Gray, still because he's pitched in Colorado his whole career, just hasn't popped. Is this the time now to start buying in? Is this the time here? Or is John Gray maybe just a mid-level pitcher in the major leagues? Does he have this other gear potentially in him now that he's out of Coors? Is it mental? Is it physical? Is it a bit of both?
So I think when you look at John Gray for this coming year, I think you need to buy him but not at the you're out of cores now, finally, you're going to be a superstar. I think he's going to be the type of guy, Joe, and we talk about these guys a lot, which is I'm going to have at least one share of John Gray on a team next year, right? Because I think the potential for him to blossom as a pitcher is absolutely there, being out of cores. And he hasn't been that terrible other than sort of the shortened season, generally speaking. I mean, a 4.59 ERA, not great last year, but obviously his expected numbers are more in line with a 4 ERA pitcher. Again, and that's out
Right,
of
that's a
course.
league average guy. Like that's kind of, you know.
I could see him being better. I do think that if you pitch your whole, I'd be interested in your opinion, Joe. If you pitch your whole season or whole career in cores, I do think that affects you a little bit. Just either mentally, even when you're on the road, or physically speaking, just having basically the ball move a little differently at your home games versus your away games, just having to pitch differently. I think you get him out of there, you get him into a decent park. His overall numbers, I think, really are something that I'd expect to improve. You look at Steamers always sort of very cautious when they project players. Like when I would always be more aggressive. They have him at a 4.31 ERA, a 1.32 WHIP. That's really not that far from what his career numbers
seems
are.
Like the same guy
in Colorado.
Hey, look, okay, spoiler alert, everybody. When it comes to projections, all it is an amalgamation of what guys
Correct.
have done.
Yep.
Or pie in the sky, which you hope they're going to be. So that's why, to me, it's like I could just look at a guy's baseball card and know the same thing the projections tell me. That's why I think projection systems in general are just grossly overrated in fantasy baseball, to the point where people live and die with them, and it's not changing the world. They're not predicting the future. They're just regurgitating everything out. It's like when a cow eats. That's how I feel about projections. You know how they go with all the different stomachs and it comes up and down? And similarly, that's the same taste I have in my mouth with some of these projection systems at times. So for all of the numbers, for all the stats, you have two choices here. John Gray either gets with a pitching guy and the mental burden, of course, comes off of him, and he develops into a Robbie Ray type pitcher, which I think is not out of bounds. I think he's very appealing in keeper dynasty formats right now, because you want to see what happens over these next few years as he matures as a pitcher and as he gets further away from cores. Okay, does he have that other gear where he develops into this other guy? Or is he just a league average, decent major league pitcher who might have an outlier, better season here and there? Either way, I'd be buying on him. That's how I feel. I'm kind of like with you. I'm curious. I'm not buying in bulk, but I'd be buying.
I think the one thing to also keep in mind, to be fair, Joe, is that he has made 30 starts once in his entire career, right? That's not a cores thing. That's just pitching hurts. And I think there are some guys like Nolan Ryan who are built in a way where, you know, the injuries just don't happen as much. Max Scherzer, again, he's dealt with like the back stuff and a couple of minor things, but he's in his late 30s at this point, and he's avoided injury for the vast majority of his career, despite the fact that he looks like he's giving max effort on every single pitch. Gray may be a guy who just, you know, whatever you factor in for him, I don't think that you should bank on a full season. And funny, Joe, just to follow up on your point about Seager, I don't mind guys who I know, even in a points league, bud, who I know are going to perform when they're in the lineup. If they miss time, I can at least replace that person with a replacement player and sort of add that on to what they're going to do. The guys who play through injuries and have sort of bad seasons, that bothers me more than guys say, okay, I'm going to book you for 100 games in my mind and move on from there. And I think that's what you do with Gray. You buy that there could be a breakout season. You buy that your probably baseline is like a league average pitcher. And then you understand that you're probably going to miss a little time with injury. And after that, you get like a nice little late round selection that you feel okay with at the back end of your staff. All
right, let's just, I was going to talk about another guy first, but let's just transition into Robbie Ray, because we mentioned his name. Robbie Ray, American League Cy Young, which one of our listeners of our show last year kept pounding the table. And I just want to tell him, you were right. You were 100% right. And he bet on him, and he said, you should bet on him too. And I said, I can't do it. And it was like 20-1, then it was 10-1, and then it was 6-1. And even at 3-1, I just never thought they were going to give it to him. And I'm glad they did. But talk about buying high, right? I mean, you're in a spot here with Robbie Ray. He turned 30 in October. So, like, I don't hate the 5-year deal for Robbie Ray. I actually think this was a really smart move here. And I think I think the Blue Jays should have gone out there and done this. Like, I think this really hurts them next year, because Robbie Ray was that good. I mean, I know he was a disaster in 2020. I know he had a 6 ERA in 2020. But I think when you look at everything that broke right last year, it was a matter of him getting back to the old mechanics, which I never understood why he was trying to get away with them in the first place. And I know it's one great season. I guess here's the question. The Mariners, who he signed with in this 5-year deal, they were a team that I think nobody thought would be competitive, and they were highly competitive at the end of last year. Do you think the Mariners have made a gross mistake here? And do you think fantasy baseball managers are going to make the same one? Or is this Robbie Ray now the guy who has found himself, found it? Because there were a lot of guys this year you could say that about. Zach Wheeler had a breakout season. Robbie Ray had a breakout season. It's tough year to year to sustain that. But Wheeler, we always thought it was coming from. Robbie Ray, I think, was a little bit further away from that.
Ray is a very tough guy for me, Joe, because it is very hard, and it is not the way I play fantasy baseball, or I advise people to play fantasy baseball, to buy into a total outlier year. I'm looking at his walk rates: 9%, 9.1, 10.7, 13.3, 11.2, 17.9, and then last year 6.7. Like, if you're going to tell me that Robbie Ray has discovered his control, then Robbie Ray is a dominant pitcher, and he is a value probably in drafts wherever he goes. Because I don't think people are going to be buying quite as high as his numbers sort of suggest. But Joe, I want to ask you, what do you do with a guy like this who's had a demonstrate? It's not like Zach Wheeler, who, as much as he took another step up, you mentioned it, like
the pedigree was always there.
Right, we were expecting this from Wheeler. It wasn't totally out of the question. But I do think that this was something that nobody saw coming whatsoever. What do you do when you have a total outlier year like this from a guy like Ray?
I'll be honest with you. I think Wheeler was a little soft. And I think getting out of New York with a chip on his shoulder about it helped him significantly. I think he's exactly the kind of guy that needed to pitch with a chip on his shoulder, and he was never able to do it because he was a little mentally soft. I think he got a little mentally tougher. Sometimes it's not all about the, the spin rates and the velocity. Sometimes it's about the person. With Robbie Ray, the two things that I like about Robbie Ray is durability. He's been a guy that makes a lot of starts. And the strikeout rate's always been off the charts. And I'm a whore for the strikeouts, Stan, at the end of the day. Like, I'm the guy that, I'm here for the strikeouts. In an era where everybody's striking out, you need guys who strike out a ton of guys if you're going to compete in these roto categories, right? So I will make the investment there, but I'm going to be very careful to make sure that I'm covering my rear end when it comes to ERA and WHIP, because I don't know if that's the spot that I buy into yet. I think what's so stunning about him is, the splits were always a challenge in Arizona in his career too. Last year, he was able to just kind of put all of those negative things aside, the bad splits aside, the inconsistencies with the walk rate at times. Like, all that stuff went away, and he became a very efficient pitcher. I think pitching in Seattle is a good thing.
Yep.
I think you have going from an offense too, where you're going from an offense that every night was going to put up 6 runs for you, to an offense where I don't know if you're exactly that confident in the Mariners offense. I think that's some good things going on there. It's like, I want to believe, but I'm just not quite there yet. But I'm going to buy Robbie Ray's season. I don't want to buy it at the peak if it's valued properly. Like, to me, he's that product. If I could love to get Robbie Ray as my second starter. Am I going to be able to do that in a lot of leagues? I don't know.
Right. That's the thing. I don't know what fantasy managers are going to think about him. I will say this, though, Joe, because this was one of your questions. I do think that the Mariners, regardless of how this works out, I give kudos to the Mariners for making this deal. I know, 5 years, $115 million. He's got, the opt-out. They all get the opt-outs now. Fine. I think it was a good move for them, because I think you got to take the shot. You need that starter. The Mariners are a burgeoning team, played better than expected last year. They've got, some youngsters coming up that could really make them a contender. I think you go out, you take the leap with Robbie Ray, and you see whether or not this is for real. So I do think that the Mariners did a good thing by doing it. I probably will have 0 shares of Robbie Ray next year, because I am a very, very cautious fantasy manager. But, if he goes crazy and he dominates again, it wouldn't absolutely shock me.
In the early consensus right now, Robbie Ray is SP 15. He is going right behind Alcantara and right before Jack Flaherty. That seems comfortable to me. Like, that is reasonable.
Okay.
I will say this. Are you more or less if I put Aaron Nola on the table or Robbie Ray, which way are you going?
Oh, goodness,
Because
Joey.
Aaron Nola is ahead of him,
Yeah.
but not in my rankings. I have him ahead of Aaron Nola because I have lost faith in Aaron Nola. As someone who's rostered him in a dynasty league for the last couple of years, it's been a very frustrating ride with Aaron Nola. And I actually think I'd rather take my chances with Ray, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that one.
It's a great question. I will say this. I have not yet done my rankings. I will try to do so this week for baseball. Man, that's going to be tough. Nola was so frustrating last year, but there's more to Nola. My guess is they're going to be right there. And my guess is I will have Nola a spot ahead. And again, this just comes down to me, Joe. It is very, very difficult for me. Very difficult for me as a fantasy analyst to give so much credence to a guy who was basically on I can't imagine the price being low enough for me to want to draft this human being, comes out of nowhere and wins the Cy Young, for me to suddenly be like, all right, man, I guess you're my strong SP2. I'm going to get there. Nola was disappointing, but the underlying numbers weren't quite as bad. My guess is I will have Nola like a spot ahead of Robbie Ray, but that is the fair range.
If I could come away with, if I don't go to a premium pitcher and I come away with, say, Lucas Giolito and Robbie Ray in a double up situation, like if I take two offensive players and then go back-to-back pitcher there, I feel comfortable with that. Again, I'd want to cover myself with some of those high leverage relievers later to bring down the whip and ERA and all that nonsense. But I mean, that I think is a viable approach. It's risky, but you know what? The risk factor with the top pitchers, the injury quotient of Jacob deGrom, the inconsistencies of Garrett Cole at times last year, Shane Bieber coming off an injury. There's a lot of risk there in the top tier of pitcher, and I'm just not here for it this year. I'm just not there.
I do think that if you do get a guy like Ray, I think you're correct. Whether it's relievers or whether it's starting pitching depth, you got to focus on that a little bit more than you otherwise would have.
All right, let's go to another big offensive player. 6 years, $140 million for a guy who hits every seventh ball. It's Javier Baez, one of our favorites here on the program. So I'll ask you this, Dan, thumbs up or thumbs down on the Javi Baez signing? See what I did there? See what I did? What do you think?
It's fine. It's
boy, oh boy.
It's very tough for me with Baez.
You need a shirt that just says meh. I feel like you need a meh. Like that should have been a shirt we sold here at the shop.
We should get that in. It's my entire persona. I will say that I have a very soft spot for Javi Baez because that GIF, whatever you want to say, of him swinging at that changeup.
That was a big argument last week between you and Yates, by the way, the GIF and GIF thing.
Pat and I go GIF because that's the way the guys.
I go GIF because it's more graphic.
Most normal humans go GIF. I get it. I go with the way the guy who invented it said to do it. But
it's not peanut butter. All right.
It's fair. Regardless, the best part is when my son was very upset at striking out. I was able to show him that and say, buddy, this is a major leaguer. And Javi Baez because he was signed by the Mets. And we went to I was at his first game, actually, with the Mets. So Will got to know him and to show him that even major leaguers, not all of them, but some major leaguers can miss a ball by that much, made him feel a little more comfortable with his strikeout. Mm-hmm. With that said, I don't know, man. Baez is what he is at this point, right? He's going to hit the crap out of the ball when he does make contact. Mm-hmm. He's going to have a strikeout rate that's going to be probably, the last 2 seasons, we've seen it revert back to the over 30% as opposed to what we saw last year. He's going to be what he's going to be. He's going to steal, 15 bags. He's probably going to hit high 20s home run. He's going to have a mediocre batting average, and that's going to be it. I had no issues with the signing of him, especially given what he can do from a defensive perspective. And he's going to be motivated because he has the opt-out. So I think he'll still play hard, but whatever. Like, it's meh. It's fine.
Well, it's also, he's going to a Detroit Tiger team that's still very youthful and rebuild. And, some nice stories here with Akil Baddoo last year. And, they've certainly got some players on the way, the Torkelsons of the world and all of that. But I gotta say, this landing spot to me is not super appealing. It's not one that I'm like, ooh, yeah, like this has bolstered him as he is now going to be in the 30s decline. Like, to me, I'm out on Javier Baez. This is the perfect time to get out, I think, of keeper leagues, because whenever you see a player sign for a lot of money, there becomes a little bit of hype around them, a little bit of expectation, maybe a little bit more. We know who Javi Baez is. Do you think over the next 3 years is going to be better Javi Baez on the Tigers? No. I can't imagine that being the case, Dan.
No, I agree with you. I do agree with you. Again, he's going from, Chicago, obviously, and then even with the Mets to a worse lineup overall and a worse park. So you could see it. But I also think that, look, Baez has the chance, if he wants, to opt out when he's entering his age 31 season. You could see him basically, if he's not happy there, getting a 5-year deal, depending on where the financials are in baseball, depending on how well he plays, getting another big deal if he wants it based on that contract. So my guess is he'll still play hard. And Joe, again, he hits the ball so hard when he does make contact that the park doesn't matter that much to me, right? Because I think when he clears it, he clears the ball pretty hard. So again,
it's getting those pitches to hit that concerns me.
I understand.
I
get it. But this is
the lineup protection not being there for Javi Baez. If I'm pitching a Javi Baez, sliders away all day long because you know you're going to frustrate him. But it's always been that way, except for you can't because there's Rizzo, or you can't because there's Bryant, or you can't because there's Alonso or Lindor. And I think when doing Detroit, you're like, what? You can't because Akil Badu's up next? No, it's not going to happen. Like, I'm not taking a shot at Akil Badu. I'm just saying, like, he becomes a very easy person to pitch around in that lineup, and therefore, I'm out.
Yeah, for me, Joe, he's always been that guy. I mean, he swings and pitches outside the zone at basically 45% of the time, which is nuts. And he's always going to do that. And yeah, maybe they'll say, you know what, I'm not scared of anybody else in this lineup, so I'm just going to make you do it. And he's a guy who walks at 4% of the time, so that's going to be troubling. Yeah, it is what it is. But
he's almost negative.
But we do see certain players, and I'm not going to compare him to one of my favorite all-time players, which is Vladdy Senior. But we do see some guys who don't walk and swing at everything and make it happen.
But Vladdy swung at everything and made contact. Big difference with Vladdy.
I completely understand. But look, the bottom line is this. His career batting average is 264. I know you don't like projections. Steamer has him projected at 244. That
feels about right.
Yeah, that's where you got it right. Correct. So it's a fair point by you, Joe. I think you take the lineup projection out, you give him a bigger park, you're going to take a few points off that batting average. That's fine. But if you get what Steamer projects, which is 244, 26, 13 steals, which I think is eminently attainable on all around.
That's not a very exciting line. 26-13 for Javi Baez. That's like
I get it. Well, well, that's the point. If you're buying him at the 31 homers, 18 steal, 265 that he had last year, you're right. I don't buy that. But I don't know, Joe, because of the fact that his tenure with the Mets was so tumultuous, thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know what the perception is going to be on Baez, and you might be able to get him at a discount. So for that, I am willing to buy him.
He's good television. I like. Let me be very transparent. This is not like the loser Met fan that I am coming out and saying, "Oh, I don't like Javi Baez." No, I think he's very entertaining. I think he's great. Fun to watch.
Had the Mets re-signed him, Joe, how would you have felt about it?
I would have felt okay because I think the environment surrounding him would have been like him playing with his buddy, and I like a little swagger. You know me, I love Bryce Harper. I like the fist pumping guys who want to punch somebody in the face like that. That's the baseball I grew up with, which I like. Joe's Tough Guys, which I can't wait to bring back. I cannot wait to bring that back this year. I've missed Joe's Tough Guys, but yeah, I like that style of baseball. I would have been okay. From a fantasy perspective, I'm trying to, keep it real. I don't like it in the Tigers situation. I think this is a team that is, bottom rung in transition, and I feel like he's going to lose interest. And I think that's going to be a dangerous thing. 162 games for the Tigers as opposed to the Cubs or the Mets. And not a lot of people in those stands. It's going to be very different.
Last thing I will say.
You got more Baez? Okay. All right.
I got one more Baez. That's it.
All right.
I was in, the Justin Mason offshoot, from Barf, right? I was in the Nerf league last year, and I think I came in second or third.
I heard that's a softer league.
He'll be here all year, folks. But yes, but I remember, and it's a deep league. I think it was 14 teams, and he had a middle infield spot. I got Javi Baez so late in that league, Joe. And roto is his better format, right? Because he strikes out a ton, doesn't walk a ton. But in roto, the counting stats matter. People were off him last year. So I don't think people are really going to be all that, excited to draft him this year. And that's where my guess is I'll have a lot of Javi Baez because I think his numbers will outperform his draft position.
All right. Very good. I'm out. So it's fun.
Fair point. Right. Yeah.
Let's go to the Blue Jays replacement for Robbie Ray, Kevin Gossman. 5 years, $110 million, which is weird because it's like, okay, we're gonna. It's like I don't understand this. Here's the guy that we don't know. So we had 5 years, $115 million with an opt out after 2023 for Robbie Ray. So I don't know, was the opt out he wanted or the extra $5 million? I can't imagine being the issue. And then instead they turn around and sign Kevin Gossman, 5 years on 10. And look, Kevin Gossman's been very good the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Last year he was a hot button topic, right? He was kind of the guy, well, he broke out. Can he do it again? Well, he did. Kevin Gossman was tremendous for the Giants last 2 seasons. A guy who always had a high pedigree. When he came up with the Orioles, he was a can't-miss prospect. They jerked him around like they jerked around Dylan Bundy and they jerked around Jake Arrieta, and eventually, like all those guys, they send him off other places. But I don't get this, because if I'm the Blue Jays, I want the guy that I know that I have in the clubhouse already instead of the guy that I don't. So, I don't know. This was puzzling to me. It made no sense. And they basically came, it's like, and they went and they signed Gossman first for 20th on the 28th. And then the 29th, Robbie Ray signed. So, I don't know, Dan. Explain this to me, please, because I got nothing.
So, I think there are a couple things. I think, number one, that might tell you what they think of Robbie Ray, Joe. I mean, it might tell you they saw him up close. And maybe that should give us more pause on Robbie Ray. The team that knows him best opted to sign an identical version of him from another team, right?
Gossman has 2 good years. Robbie Ray has 1 great year.
That's right. And by the way, hello, the Dan Harris philosophy, which is like, okay, I saw it now for 2 years. Now I'm more than willing to buy into it. With that said, Joe, last year he had a 2.81 ERA. Okay, very solid. But again, even with the fact that the Giants' home park isn't quite as pitcher friendly as it used to be, it's still a decent park in the National League. You are now in Toronto.
And the American League East.
My friend. So he had a 3.55 expected ERA. He had a 3 FIP, a 3.28 FIP. But again, I know you don't like projections. I like to give them because it gives context. Joe,
I don't mind them.
You're not looking at it, right? You're not looking at the projections, of course.
I'm not looking at the projections.
What do you think Steamer has his projected ERA at going to Toronto?
What was his ERA last year? 2.88?
2.81. And the year before that in the shortened season, 3.62.
I would think 3.64. How's that?
Ooh, I like it. 3.87. Which
87. Again, wow, that's a huge jump.
But that's what I think.
I thought I was being a jerk.
No, you go to Toronto, you are being a jerk.
Well, that's fair.
I mean, look, his home run rate last year was 0.94 per 9. Like, that's not sustainable. They have it bouncing back up to closer to his career mark of 1.21. Again, he leans into the splitter now, which is what everybody has always wanted him to do, and it's a great pitch. There are those games where it's not a great pitch, and those are the games that he gets totally dominated. I think I'll be willing to buy Gossman so long as there is you have moved from the Giants to Toronto sort of dip. But I buy him as a pitcher who has turned his career around and somebody who I could rely on with the understanding that he's now in a terrible division in a terrible park who will probably get wins, but his numbers will regress a bit. But in terms of like the overall skill change, yeah, I buy it. Yeah,
I mean, look, it's certainly Kevin Gossman. I have a lot of respect for because I like those guys who kind of they find themselves and they get right. It's just once again it's the terms of your investment, and I think that's the difference. Like Robbie Ray to me, I still have right around that top 10 pitchers. And then you get to this point where Kevin Gossman's going in the same spot as Freddie Peralta right now in early consensus. Mm-hmm. And I've got Freddie Peralta 4 spots ahead of him easily. And you know me, I'm a Freddie Peralta guy.
Yes.
Once again, a whore for the strikeouts. And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like I want the guys that are going to put dudes away. Freddie Peralta is going to put dudes away. And I think Freddie Peralta might make the kind of jump where we all sit around here looking at each other next year going, even if you like Freddie Peralta, I can't believe how good he could be. And I understand all the concerns of, it's the same concerns we had about Corbin Burns, where I just want to say, well, I shouldn't have had so many concerns. I should have listened to myself and bet him for Cy Young at the beginning of the year, because if I did, I would have been very happy, because he was the dark horse. He was the guy, remember?
Yes.
But at the end of the year, like, I don't want to make that same mistake twice with Freddie Peralta. And I'm looking at Gossman, and to me, if those guys are close to each other in ADP, I'd rather go that route. I'm going to throw another name out for you.
Shoot.
Chris Sale or Kevin Gossman, 2 guys in the same division, different set of circumstances. One guy's been elite for a long time, just came back from injury. Another guy is newly elite, so to speak. How would you feel about who would you rather draft?
If we're assuming reports on Sale's health are great, right?
Yeah, let's say he pitched at the end of last year. He was fine.
Yeah, I'll take Sale. Because I think that the upside for Sale is much, much higher, even at this stage of his career. He's going to be entering his age 33 season. The strikeout upside is high. We rarely see him pitch and not dominate. And there's downside with Gossman coming to the American League, and we haven't seen it for quite as long. I mean, Sale's like my ideal pitcher, like a guy who has a long history of track record, coming off an injury-shortened season, healthy coming into spring training. That's a guy who ends up on a lot of Dan Harris teams. Doesn't always work out, but I will take Sale above Kevin Gossman.
Why does everybody have an opt-out for 2023? Like, the CBA is happening now. Do they think they're getting like a 2-year term? Like, I don't know. Like, what's going on? You notice this is like, I see Marcus Stroman's contract's 2023 opt-out. We just talked about Robbie Ray.
I think it's the 2 years. I think most guys now get
they just want the 2-year and then say, I can make more money next time around.
I think that's sort of become the industry standard. And it's so hilarious, by the way. When opt-outs were first there, I remember thinking, like, what is this nonsense?
CC Sabathia was the first major opt-out I remember, where you're like, oh my God, like, this is a huge thing, and he's going to opt out. And he did. He got paid more.
The problem is, again, now that it's sort of like that guy got an opt-out, I want my opt-out. And it's so beneficial to the players, right? Because you have a great season. Great. Go make yourself giant money. You have a terrible season. You can be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to stay put here with the
it's the Dan Harris path. I mean, you've opted out after 2 years. So obviously everyone's just taking a page out of the Dan Harris.
It doesn't get much better than what Dan Harris put on the table last 2 years, which tells you something about what the next several years could I not opted out, right? Exactly.
You should see. I'm going to put out there, what do you think Dan Harris is actually doing for the job? I mean, I can't wait to see the responses in the
rodeo
channels.
Clown.
The rodeo clown,
rodeo
flight
clown.
Attendant.
I would love it. Fly all over for free.
Let's fly through some of the lesser signings, but maybe impactful in terms of fantasy. Marcus Stroman, 3 years, $71 million with the Cubs. Once again, the Cubs are a team rebuilding. This was a curious signing. I think this was like, he took the money on the table. Okay.
Yeah.
Marcus Stroman, fifth starter for you, matchup guy at best, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's about where I have him too. Marlins signing 4 years, $53 million for Avisail Garcia. Now, do you think Garcia is a guy that we've been waiting for him to have that other gear? Hasn't quite happened yet. Do you think the Marlins know something we don't, or are they just trying to filler here?
He had 30 home runs last year. He showed some pop. I was surprised.
Yeah, Miller Park is, it's
a little different. I was very surprised by this deal. Just a veteran presence seems like an overpay. I will probably have very little Avisail Garcia on my team next year.
All right, this offseason move makes a little bit more sense now that Kyle Seager retired. The Padres trading second baseman outfielder Adam Frazier to the Mariners. Mariners kind of, a season that came out of nowhere for them. Two of the best prospects in baseball on their way, basically, to contribute. And they added Frazier and added Robbie Ray. I kind of like the Mariners offseason, Dan.
Yeah, I think they've had a great offseason, and it was great to see them build. And again, I know Kelenic was massively disappointing, but you assume that he's going to take another step. They've got some good things coming up the pike. I love it. Go Mariners.
All right. Cardinals signed Steven Matz. Thank you, Steven Matz, because apparently you upset Steve Cohen so much that he went out and signed Max Scherzer.
I love
Steven Matz, I like to send you an edible arrangement. I want to send you all the fruit, my friend. Just very healthy for you. 4 years, $44 million. Look, I mean, I get this from the Cardinals standpoint. It's probably a good move. And, the lefties tend to age a little better, too, when they start to figure things out. Steven Matz is Steven Matz. I'll put him in that matchup category, but would you rather have Steven Matz with the Cardinals, or would you rather have Marcus Stroman with the Cubs?
Probably would have said anybody else other than Matz, who you gave me as the alternative. I want zero to do with Steven Matz, who had a fine season, despite the fact that he was pitching with Toronto. Don't love a guy who has a very checkered health history, who doesn't strike out a ton of guys, who I don't feel like I could rely on. So I am totally avoiding Steven Matz this year, despite the Cardinals' magic.
I feel like the Blue Jays are telling you they believe in their young pitching with their offseason. Like, they must believe in Manoah. They must believe in the kids they got coming through there, because
I believe in Manoah. I mean, there's a rookie that I'm willing to buy.
Hoss. He's a hoss. That boy's a hoss. You don't see it. I love it. Big, sloppy boy just throwing heat. I like that kid. All right, Noah Syndergaard signed with the Angels, 1 year show me deal for $21 million. This is curious. I don't know why he didn't just do this deal with the Mets. Maybe he just wanted to make sure he got something before the lockout. You think that he's got a little remorse not pitching with DeGrom and Scherzer now, potentially in New York? And were you a little sad inside your belly here when he ended up signing somewhere else? Because I know you and I love Noah, but man, let's be honest, he hasn't been on the field for the last couple of years.
First, I don't know whether or not they signed Scherzer if he takes the deal, right? That's $21 million, right? Are they able to sign Scherzer if he takes?
I think Steve Cohen can do whatever Steve Cohen wants.
That's very fair. That's a very
I love. This is what it feels like to be a Yankee fan without the championships. This is great.
So bizarre.
So far, I'm loving it.
I will say, like, of course, a part of me, was sad when Thor left. It's a good social media presence. I
Oh,
went
he's
to
great.
Game 3 of the World Series where he pitched, and that was one of my great baseball memories. But no, really, look, yeah, I don't think I will have any faith that he's going to be a reliable pitcher next year, either from a real life or a fantasy perspective. So in that sense, I very quickly said, okay, like, good luck, man.
I
It's
think it's a
cool.
good move for the Angels. They are a team that
Oh, yes.
desperately need a
Oh,
pitching.
yes.
And of all the shots you could take on somebody on a 1 year show me deal, Noah Syndergaard's a good one because you don't need him to be the one. Like that's not that kind of pressure. I mean, in terms of star power, you've got it there. And what do we always say about the Angels? It's like you can hit the ball all day. It's like your 2 through 5 starters have been trash last couple of years, and it's just
Yeah.
not going to get done.
And a 1 year deal, great. 'Cause doesn't lock you into anything. And he explodes and you like him and he sign him longer deal. But if it doesn't work out, okay, it's 1 year, 21 mil. No big deal.
Tigers signed Eduardo Rodriguez, 5 years, 77 million. I know they've got the Mize and Mannings of the world coming through the system. Scooble's a good young pitcher. I think we like what he might be someday. But this was kind of an interesting one too. I mean, I like that the Tigers were showing you, okay, we're going to be more competitive next year. But again, when you downgrade from the Red Sox lineup and defense to the Tigers, that's a big downgrade in my opinion. So there's another player where I'll probably have some shares because, as I said, the strikeouts will be there, but
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to have a lot of them. I'm not going to be nearly as excited about them as I once was.
A guy who pitched much, much better than his underlying numbers suggest he should have pitched last year, right? He had the 4.74 ERA, the 3.50 xERA, the 3.32 FIP, the 3.43 xFIP. So there is stuff to like. He's a guy who, again, the whip is never there. I hate the fact that the whip is always in the 1.3s, but he's a guy who, again, another guy who I think fantasy managers are just completely tired of, Joe. And I think that the numbers, 5 years, 77, totally normal. A veteran pitcher, come in there, stabilize that sort of team. I like the deal for the Tigers. I'll have a lot of him in the late rounds because I think fantasy managers hate him.
Couple of bullpen guys here. The Angels bring back Raisel Iglesias, 4 years, 58. I thought that was a very smart move on their part. He's been one of the more consistent closers. I think we all like that. Mark Melancon, 2-year deal with the Diamondbacks. So there you have that. And the Braves signing Kirby Yates for 2 years, $8.25 million. So bringing Kirby Yates into that was kind of a good move. The worst moves, though, to me, Jorge Alfaro to the Padres, where you have 5,000 catchers. I don't understand this. It's like, we have a lot of catchers. So let's go get another catcher. Yeah. I mean, maybe they feel like he'll be a DH for them if the DH comes. I could see that because I think that's certainly more Jorge Alfaro's. Gary Sanchez, maybe the National League might get a job as a DH someday. Just get him out from behind the plate and maybe that'll be the trick. And then the Red Sox trading away Renfroe. Hunter Renfroe going away. I mean, I don't understand this one. I don't get this one, Dan. He had a nice season for Boston. I don't get it.
I didn't either. I loved Renfroe this year, by the way. I had so many shares of him just because he was available late in deeper leagues, and he had a really nice offensive season. He's great defensively. I didn't really get it. I know, I text with 2-man mayor, Red Sox fans. They didn't like it either, so I don't really know. Bad move.
Red Sox have had a weird offseason. They let
Very
pitching
weird.
go. They let, yeah. Look, I mean, I understand they have payroll issues. Like, I think that's where this is probably stemming from. But, at the end of the day, still, you competed last year. And I don't think a lot of people thought that they would. Everyone was giving them a pass. And all of a sudden, the Red Sox were like actually a competitive team for quite most of the season. Yeah. All right. So those are right now, as we stand on the 4th of January, the important signings. Now, we won't have any more signings until the lockout ends. So I'm sure it's going to be fast and furious. And I got to say, after the last few years, it has been a dreadful, slow, plodding offseason. This was great. This felt like football and basketball where there's like that window where everybody could sign and everybody was signing. It was hot. It was great. I loved it. Now we have a little chance to breathe and hopefully it looks like we're going to get another one of those again. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we're going to get at the DH in the National League. I think that's already kind of a done deal. Dan, anything else do you think is going to come out of the CBA before we get to our New Year's resolutions for fantasy baseball?
I don't think so. I think the DH is really what we're going to see. I don't know, man. Just get it done, dude. Like, get it done before, February 15th or whenever pitchers and catchers report, whenever spring training starts. Please do not hurt baseball any more than you have to. But I think the DH is really the big thing that we're going to see.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Dan Harris, let's go. Take us through your New Year's resolutions for fantasy baseball in 2022. What do you got for everybody?
All right, so I think number one is take the leap is what I called it, which for me, Joe, you joke about projections and how what projections, like I am somebody who relies on projections a little bit, mainly because I do my own. And it's very hard for me to get off that. And you got to get off that if you're going to get the share of the breakout Flatty season, right? We said it all the time last year. Like, you got to get a share. You got to see what's going to happen with this. And to get that share of Vladdy this year cost you, because it costs you every single year. And I was so rarely willing, Joe, to just say, oh, I can see this happening. I'm going to go way beyond my values, way beyond my projections. And kudos to you, because when we did a tout sort of salary cap draft together, and yeah, it was a great team. And a lot of it was because you're just more than willing when you're like, let's get the share of this guy. Let's see what it is. And I'm very unwilling to take that leap when it deviates from where I have a guy valued. So that's one, because that's what it is. Number two is to get more shares of my guys. And it goes back to the same thing, Joe, which is very much of I have my values. I do not like to deviate from my values. They are based on my projections. I am a robot. Let's see what happens. And a lot of times my projections, a guy like Castellanos, who I was all in on last year, and I wound up with a share of him, as opposed to basically having him on every single team, because I said, this is a guy who's going to have a monstrous season, and I know it, and still, I'm just not willing to go out and do this. This is for fun. Like, yes, maybe we play for jelly beans, obviously, in certain things, but for the most part, fantasy baseball is fun. When you want and you like a guy, go out there and get them. I'm going to do that for sure. And the third thing is, Joe, this comes down to, again, me not being a part of the show anymore and everything like that. I adore fantasy baseball. Still love to play it. Still going to have a billion leagues going on. But I want to enjoy baseball more, even without fantasy, And I found myself sort of thinking about baseball almost purely in fantasy terms last year. And I just want to sort of realize, like, how much fun baseball can be, despite the fact that it's so much shifts and some stuff maybe that we don't like about it.
Can we put that in the CBA? Can we get rid of the shift?
They kind of want to. I think
I think everybody looks at it as like, it's hurt the game. I don't care what you think of. And look, guys are never going to learn to hit the other way. It's just not going to be that thing. They're not going to. It's not what the game is now. So just limit the shift. I'm not saying you get to take it away, but I don't understand why a guy from third base, if he plays the position of third base, can go and play short right, right field at some point in time. That makes no sense to me at all. You're playing out of position. Everybody can shift, but you can't go past the base. I think if you play on the left side of the infield, I think that's fair. I think that's a good enough shift anyway. But I like that. I think that is very nice. And you know what? I think after doing that draft with you last year, I think you and I are one of the few pairings that I think we could actually run a team together in NFBC and be very successful, because my a little bit guns a-blazing style with your reserve is a good balance, where I think you look at the roster at the end of the day, and especially in those auctions, which, again, it's very Wild West. Those auctions can be from everyone. I actually enjoyed that quite a bit. I think we were a good complement. So if you want to do that, I'm in. I
actually will say, Joe, that having a teammate, a partner in a fantasy baseball league is very difficult, generally speaking. But I thought you and I worked well. And I do say that is my role with my partners in fantasy baseball salary cap drafts. And I have a long-time one that I do with a close friend of mine. And we compare ourselves to like a married couple, where I am sort of the budgeted spouse. And he's like, look, I think we can buy new curtains, and I think we need the new furniture, and I think we need the new television set. And I'm like, and how are we going to pay for all that? You don't know where we're going to get the money. He's like, we'll find the money. It'll be fine. That's our entire dynamic, and I think that that's fair. But to my New Year's resolutions, I want to be a little more like the guy who wants to buy the television set when I don't know if I can afford it, and that'll be fun. So yeah, I think that's right, Joe. So maybe we'll do some leagues together this year.
All right, before I even get into my New Year's resolutions, I thought you would enjoy this. So this is my dissertation in the beginning of the Black Book that I do every single year. And obviously the Black Book now available on Amazon for you. Great contributor. So here we go. Over the last decade plus of its existence in the game of baseball, here's the evolution of pitching. In 2010, 44 pitchers through 200 innings. In 2019, that number shrunk to 12. In 2020, that number was 14. And last year, just 4. And in terms of stolen bases, in 2020, 18 players had 30 stolen bases. Last year, that number was down to just 6 players with 30 stolen bases. So the evolution is here, and it's obvious, and we have to start to evolve with it. And I think it's time that we take a good hard look at the structure of fantasy baseball and start to ask ourselves, okay, a stolen base isn't really worth a home run in real baseball. So why do we value it the same in regular baseball? Why do we value a save, which is 3 outs, compared to a win, basically the same, which is at least 5 innings? That's 18 outs if I'm doing the math correctly. It's time. It's time to get past this old school mentality. So my New Year's resolution, stop playing in roto leagues that I don't like anymore because people ask you and it's the industry standard. I'm out. I'm done. I'm not doing it. Get rid of 2-catcher leagues. Get rid of formats like this that don't value everything. In baseball, everything has its place, a single, a double, a triple. Let's start to value all these things, right? Points leagues are far better. The problem is people say, well, like head to head. So play everybody every week. Go to a hybrid format. If you play everyone every week, it's season long and head to head at the same time because it's the same kind of management and it's a lot easier in terms of valuing everything appropriately because a save is not as important as a 5-inning win and a stolen base sure as hell ain't as important as something that scores a run, which is what? Oh, right, a home run scores a run because that's what baseball is about. Not how many stolen bases you can get. It's about how many runs you can get. That's what baseball means. Until we learn that and correct that problem, fantasy baseball can't take the next step in the fantasy evolution. Number 2, devalue starting pitching overall as a whole. It's time. I just gave you those stats in terms of the numbers and the years of where we're going here. Where we're going from 50 guys throwing 200 innings 10 years ago to 5. I mean, it's a problem, okay? It's a problem with the health. We have the best health. We have the best training. We have the best science. We have all this stuff, and nobody can pitch anymore. Max velocity is not working. It's working for a short period of time, but at the end of the day, is that the most important thing? Let's teach everybody how to pitch again, but in the meantime, my goodness, we need to get off of this idea that we can build even points league teams around pitching. I think we need to go and make that pivot and start devaluing pitching as a whole. It's almost like running backs in football. We have to kind of have a hard conversation about that too because it's just different now. Yeah, there's some elite guys still out there, but you know what? I don't know if it's the best way to construct a roster. And the last one, I'm like you, Dan. I'm going to try to love again too. I'm going to try my best not to be as pessimistic about the Mets. I'm going to try to enjoy them because even last year, if you remember, when everybody was enjoying them, I was miserable because I kept saying it's going to come around. And sure enough, unfortunately, it did, right? They set a record last year, didn't they? Most games in first place and then to finish in last place, I believe, or some crazy thing like that, or missed the playoffs or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try my best to reset and learn to love again. And that's what I'm going to try to do. And I will also tell you, I will miss this because for some reason doing this baseball show with you, it is not work. I don't know what it is about this and about the two of us here talking baseball, but it's just about as much fun as you could possibly have. So I will absolutely miss this. And Dan Harris, again, we wish you all the best here. We know you're going to crush it. No flight will be safe with you as a flight attendant or whatever the heck it is you're going to do next. Yes. But they're the better for getting you. And we're so excited for you. And again, it has nothing to do with fantasy, guys. This is reality for Dan Harris. He's moving on to a position that has nothing to do with sports. It has everything to do with reality. And it's Dan's dream. And we could not be more excited for him.
I appreciate it. I will miss this show almost as much as I'll miss anything about this company. It's great. Do not worry. Baseball is not going away from the Fantasy Pros. As Joe said, we have plans. We were talking about it. The show will still be fantastic, even though I won't be a part of it. And stick with us. I can't wait. And Joe, we'll go to a Mets game this year. We'll take the family and shake. I
haven't been for a long time. Well, that's good. That's at least $300 right
there.
Shake Shack.
$400 really. The line of Shake Shack is still incredibly long, so don't worry about it.
See, I'm the guy that likes to get to the game for batting practice. So you can get your food, you eat your food during batting practice where there's no lines, and then you sit and actually enjoy the game. I never understood that. People like the ballpark's open. That's when you go eat, and then you go watch the game. It's a whole 4-hour event. I don't know.
I'll meet you there.
If anybody can get me back in the ballpark, it's you. I will break the streak for you, my friend. All right.
Thank you.
That'll do it for us, but there's a lot more, preseason baseball to talk about, which we will coming up soon. We got a lot more baseball shows coming at you. So welcome back, everybody, for Baseball 2022 at Fantasy Pros. We're just getting started here. So that'll do it for us today, but there's a lot more coming at you. For Dan Harris, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.